Hello and welcome to Digging Hourly. I'm Jonathan Stark. Today I'm joined by guest Jason Comer. Jason, welcome to the show.
Thank you. Thanks for having me.
So for folks who are just hearing your name for the first time, could you tell us a little bit about who you are and what you do?
Sure. My name is Jason. Live in Arizona. I went back to architecture school pretty late. I was around 30. Worked in a firm for 7 years coming out of the recession, which was kind of a horrible time for architects. But it was a good time to be in a firm because I had that stability. I went out on my own exactly 10 years ago this month and didn't have a huge plan, but I just knew I wanted to be on my own and kind of do my own thing. And after a while, I settled in on doing residential projects, which is something I had never done in a firm. So even though I'm licensed architect, I'm kind of self-trained on the projects that I do now. So for a long time, I was really undifferentiated, at the mercy of whoever called me.
Yeah.
Lots of low-value projects. There was one year I think I did 50 or 60 building permits in a year, which is just insane.
Wow.
Yeah, and probably 2 years ago, I really tuned into value pricing. Took the Win Without Pitching seminar with Blair Enns and Shannon Lee.
Oh, great.
Yeah, and that was really transformational in terms of negotiating with clients, raising my fees significantly, multiple of what I was doing before.
Mm-hmm.
But I think I still have the same issues, which is I'm not well suited for client work. So I'm trying to break out of client work and do something that's just not tied to one-on-one work.
So for folks who are not architects, I know we've got a few listening, but not mostly. Can you give us a little bit more of an idea of what your day-to-day is like or has been like? Like the 50 building permits.
Yeah, no, that was insane. And that was a lot of like really low volume projects. Some of that was coming out of the last recession. So, you might have like a $1,200 client you spent 2 or 3 days on. I'm not really doing those kind of projects at all now. What I
kind
have
of a
now
project
is,
would that be though? Is that like
that
a
would be
kitchen
like,
remodel or?
can we add a shower to our powder room and go get a permit? Or can we knock out a non-load bearing wall and add a kitchen island to our kitchen?
Okay,
So
gotcha.
kind of easy projects you could knock out really quick, but low value, just kind of nuts and bolts work.
Okay. And in addition to the building permit piece, like what's your interaction?
Yeah. So today, I guess it'd be more helpful to talk about what I do today. So today it's more, the ideal project is a brand new house. So it's usually a pretty successful person in their 40s through 60s that might have more than one house. They've bought a piece of land that might be $1 million, a tear down in a established neighborhood that might be over $1 million.
Yep.
And we establish a program, which for an architect just means, how many rooms, how many bedrooms, how many bathrooms, rough square footage, work through floor plans. And really the work is kind of divided into 2, maybe 3 phases. The first one just being due diligence, establishing the scope, what can they legally do, what can they afford realistically. And then most of the work is really the design phase where you're really doing the sexy work. And then at a certain point, it kind of shifts into production, doing the construction documents. And I would say that that's probably 40 to 50% of the hours if you're looking at scope. But historically, like, clients don't value that. They don't understand that, and they don't understand why it's really important to them. And it really creates a lot of risk for the client if that's not done right. Like, I've taken over projects where people have charged the client, say, $10,000 for their drawings, and they've made $60,000 mistakes in the drawings. So,
Yeah.
I charge more than that, but I mean, that's the kind of mistakes that I see. So anyway, that portion of a typical project is really uncomfortable because there's a lot of urgency from a client. They're asking for status updates. They want to see some progress, but that could take 4 or 5, 6 months, and there's engineers and consultants involved. So there's a lot of things I don't control that affect the time. And that's what I'd really like to get out of, that urgency and that anxiety of a client.
And how would you have priced that most recently?
So it's I totally bought into Win Without Pitching. So it's priced the client, not the job. But, on the low end, 30,000. On the high end, I think the most I was able to achieve was like 120.
And that would take them through to what point of the project with your involvement?
Yeah, and that gets them through the building permit. And then there's like occasional phone calls and questions and changes for another year, probably after that. So, a typical client, they may be around for, on the low end, 2 years. And on the high end, I just got a building permit for a project that started early COVID.
Hmm. You just got the permit.
Yeah, there was lots of unrelated problems on that, with permitting and the city utilities and stuff that had nothing to do with me. But I think I just look back and I first talked to them in like November 2020.
Hmm.
And so, here we are 3.5, 4 years later.
Okay, and just for people who have never interacted with an architect, including me, the permit is the end result of the plan. Like you can't get a permit without plans, I'm guessing.
Yeah. And that's kind of, architects impose a lot of restrictions on themselves. So everybody kind of handles it differently. There are architects that only do the design side,
Hmm.
and then they hand it off to another architect, drafter, engineer to do the building permit documents.
Okay.
So
Yep.
there's a way to get out of that, which I would like to do.
Hmm.
And there's other architects, like I have friends that do all the interior design, so far as to go to a showroom with a client and pick out tile and colors and do renderings and
Mm.
order furniture. And so they're much more involved for longer. So there's a
Right.
variety of ways to do it. I'd like to arrange it so that I'm not there for 2 and 3 years. Because,
Right.
you can just map that out. If you deal with 10 new people a year, you might have 30 people at a given time that can call you with a question because you've got last year's 10 people and the 10 people the year before that.
Yep.
You know,
Yep. So what's your favorite part of the stuff that you've been doing, the sort of scope of project that you've been doing? Is that front piece your favorite part, and the doing the drafting is not so much fun? Or
Yeah, yeah. I guess that goes to the reason I even got into it, and it's just to be in isolation, come up with an idea, and think I want to do that, and then just solve that problem, in that design. That's the whole reason for it, and doing that with new personalities that have never done it before, that have a lot of anxiety and pressure and aren't good at making those kind of decisions, doing that together with them is very stressful sometimes.
yeah,
Even a
yeah, yeah,
great client is going to come with issues.
right, yeah, they're total noobs to the situation. I mean, like I'm you have no idea how little I know what you're talking about, right? So like, and I would be in your target market, right? So if I wanted, we were literally looking at land the other day. It's just like, how could kids afford a starter home today? And like, well, what if you built, like, what would the price be like if you, how much is a piece of, we're kind of like goofing around on Zillow, and but I don't know diddly about the reality of any of it, none of it.
Yeah, well, there's a lot of similarities between like software developers and, like, if you think just the average software client that tries to tell the developer how they want buttons to work,
Yeah,
how infuriating that might be to somebody that's really good at that. And I'm not trying to say
right.
that I'm the world's best architect, but if you've done 300 projects, you have a real sense of how things need to go together.
Yeah,
And a person doing it for the first time, they think they know everything because they've lived in a house for their entire life. So
yeah,
of course they know how houses work.
right,
you know.
right.
So
I
and
listen to a lot of records.
yeah, exactly. Yeah, I've listened to music my entire life. I can obviously be a singer.
Yeah.
So
Okay.
so that's a lot of that. My reaction to that is just my personality. It's clients are they're regular human beings, and they don't have bad intentions, but that can just be a stressful process.
Yeah. Some people are cut out for that. Some people
Yeah.
are interested in that kind of shepherding and education and that kind of taking clients under their wing and walking them through things. And I don't have that personality for software as much as other people I've recognized. And obviously, you're identifying that you're also not the kind of person that has the perhaps patience to describe basics to someone who's not an expert just to calm them down. And
Yeah, yeah, and there's an attitude that comes along with the kind of projects I work on, where these are successful people who are used to issuing orders and having people jump.
right.
So you're in the situation of, and it's just now that I'm approaching 50, that I'm older than some of the clients. So that played
Mhm.
into it for a long time. But even now, when I'm older than the client, there's the idea that they have the money, so they get to make the decisions. And
Hmm.
that's true. They're going to live in the house. It is their money, but that can be a frustrating process. So I'd like
Yeah.
to break out into a productized service, and I see a couple of ways that that could work. And I'm finally to the point where I have some runway to where I can kind of go cold turkey on the clients
Hmm.
for a while and really pursue it, because that's been a problem in the past. I've tried it and then either ran out of money or, yeah, mostly just run out of money and time.
Yeah.
So
Yeah. Okay. What are some ideas that you have for moving away from client work and into productized services or maybe even products?
yeah, I've thought about this off and on for 3 or 4 years, so I can boil it down to the ones that I think are the most viable. The one that's most common is stock floor plans. So sometimes you'll see this in the supermarket. There's a magazine that has a bunch of floor plans in it.
Hmm. Hmm.
Really, those magazines are catalogs for a company that sells those plans online.
Okay.
And so they have hundreds of designers that send their floor plans to this online servicing company that
Hmm.
markets it, and then the designer gets a cut, on average like 50%. So they
Hmm.
might sell a floor plan for $2,000, the designer gets 1,000, and then the company, they do different ways of fulfillment, but in the end the client gets a PDF of a really basic set that's totally enough to get a permit in a rural county in Texas
Hmm.
and would not even make it past the front door in a top 10 major metro city with really intense regulations. So
Hmm.
some but your average buyer of a $2,000 plan set is probably not a high-end client that's going to build a $5 million house.
Right.
So there's trade-offs all the way around. That's kind of the most obvious one,
Hmm.
and it's a volume thing. And I've
Sure.
interacted with people online that do it and make mid five or mid six figures a year doing that, but they've been doing it for 10 or 20 years.
Hmm.
So they have a library of 200-300 plans that are online with different publishers that are just getting sales 2-3 times a week.
Hmm.
It's hard to go to get there right away. There's just a lot of work. So that's the most obvious one.
Yep.
Uh, what I'd like to do is something like that, but with a higher ticket.
Hmm.
So somewhere that's kind of bridging the gap between something that's perceived as a high end design and not a commodity, because that's a very commodity based business. You go to those websites and you can scroll for 45 minutes and just click through 12 floor plans on a page. You know,
Yeah. It's like WordPress themes.
yeah, yeah, oh yeah, 100%, 100%. So that's the obvious one.
Hmm.
And then probably the idea that I'm most keen on is there are design architects. For example, there's one in South Africa that does really high end homes, and they do them all over the world. Singapore, United States, Russia, France, London, and they'll do the front end work and charge a handsome fee for that, and then a local architect will do the back end work.
Hmm.
So I'm wondering if there's a way I can do a pre-designed design that maybe I have a personal catalog and then capture that kind of client online and not reinvent the wheel with every client.
Right.
Uh, and at some point turn them loose to somebody local for the
The drafting. And
yeah, the work that they don't value very much and don't even know that they need, but they really do need it.
hmm. Okay. So I'm detecting a possible friction here where it makes sense to me that people who are kind of at the low end of the market and are buying commodity floor plans for 2 grand would be open to the idea of doing things on the cheap. So it is there a mismatch between your existing buyers, let's say, or maybe somewhere in between your existing buyers and the people that would buy one of these $2,000 plans? Is there a disconnect between, like, I'm used to getting exactly what I want, so I would never buy an off the shelf design?
Yeah, yeah, and that's probably the biggest hurdle to that. So if that doesn't work, then at a certain point you might have to go a little down market. And with those stock floor plans, just to give you an idea like what that means, I had a client 2 years ago that bought a stock floor plan from someone in, I think, Mississippi or South Carolina.
Mhm.
They paid, I think, $2,000 or $3,000 for the plan, and then they paid that person to modify them to their liking. Make the bedroom a little bigger, add a shower, things like that. And they spent
Mhm.
another $2,000 or $3,000. And then they had to hire me to get it through the city locally. And between me and my engineer, I think we charged another $15,000.
Mm.
So they were. It was funny. I thought that they were spending close to $1 million on the house. Pretty big house. Uh,
Mhm.
Not great finishes, but a lot of square feet.
Yep.
And I just thought it was really funny that they started with that online versus having a fully custom design. So I mean, I don't know if that's just a anecdote, but
Yeah. So would you be open to the idea of modifying an off the shelf? Like you sell a plan, not modifying someone else's, but you sell a plan for, I don't know, $30,000, and it's got some kind of guarantee that in I don't know, in these municipalities or something, that this will not need to be modified for an engineer to get the building
yeah,
permit.
part of that's right. Which is if I had a catalog of designs that I'd created and I was kind of intimate with, and I knew how the logic of the design was put together. If I decided to make a closet larger or add a bay to the garage, that would be relatively easy on my end,
Hmm.
potentially. Uh, there's not the nut you can't crack is that you do something in one city that's guaranteed to be permitted everywhere,
Hmm.
because there are, just to give you an idea, like locally, there's probably six different building codes. People are in
Yep.
different years, different cities are in different years. So each city has their own requirements, and there's no one size fits all. And so,
Okay.
like, if I did a project in Arizona, the insulation thickness would be different than a project I did in Rhode Island.
Right.
There is no one size fits all, but you can give the basis of something that can have that added work later,
Hmm.
to make it fully constructible.
What if you focused on a target market? Like, I was on your website and it said desert homes or something like that. It was like a very
Yeah,
specific kind of. So, could you use that as like a, a, a sort of a segment or a niche that you went into that would maybe have a little bit more transferability from, I don't
yeah.
know, city in Arizona to city in New Mexico?
Yeah, and that would probably be a good path, because certain designs are suited for certain locations. Like, a house that would be done in Providence, Rhode Island would look really out of place in Phoenix, and
Yeah.
vice versa. So
Mhm.
that probably would be a good way to kind of target that more geographically.
Those pictures that I saw on your homepage, are those real or are those something that you had
I
mocked
think
up or
one of
something?
those projects was only renderings because the client would not allow us to have it professionally photographed.
Mm,
And then the rest of them, I think, were all real photos.
wow. I mean, the
Yeah.
stuff is gorgeous. It screams high end. It's obviously a very specific kind of style, so only a certain kind of person is going to want that.
Yeah.
But it screams high end, and I could imagine someone looking at it and being like, "I want that." Not really knowing, like just feeling like okay, yeah, 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 yeah. I get the feel of what that's going to feel like. I want that feeling that this thing gives me. And and if customizations aren't out of the question, that feels like it maybe could thread the needle on, with a higher end kind of client who's used to tailor-made things.
Yeah, yeah. I've talked about this with or a colleague that, the way that you buy a BMW, or the way people think that they might do it is they get on the website and you can click the color and you can change the transmission and the upholstery and the rims. And so there's like variations you can do. If it was something more like that versus, kind of the worst kind of project is like they have a floor plan and they want this. They just want a larger kitchen, two more bedrooms, an extra bay of the garage, and make it 2 stories and make it half the size.
Yeah, yeah.
Like I've had people that not that extreme, but that's how you can kind of read some of their requests sometimes. So
Yeah, that happens in software too, where people are like, "Oh, I bought this WordPress theme or this Shopify theme, and I want to use that to get me started, but then I want all these customizations that are actually much harder to do on top of this foundation that wasn't meant for it than if you just did the whole thing from scratch in the first place."
yeah, yeah, that just introduces chaos. Like there's got to be somebody to
Yeah.
kind of systematize it, control it.
Mhm.
I mean, not even to do volume, but just for sanity.
Yeah, well, the whole point is you're trying to smooth this out, of course, and if you're getting people that want, it's really like I imagine it's like a spectrum. So if you order an iPod, you can get it if they even still have those. But if you order an iPod or an iPad or something, you can kind of customize it. You can pick the shell color. You can maybe get an inscription. You can pick the size of the storage, but you can't change the screen size.
Yeah, yeah, that's a really good analogy.
So, is there a parallel in the space that you'd like to occupy, where there, for any given design? Well, actually, I know this from the knitting world because people sell knitting patterns on Ravelry, and usually, there'll be optional things that you can do, and certainly different sizes. So, if like someone wants an extra large sweater versus a small sweater, they'll be like, "Here's the pattern for that. Here's the pattern for this, or here's the pattern, and here's what you do differently if you want it to be." Buttoned, whatever, the minor differences that the pattern can support. And it's the same with themes in WordPress, in fact, now that I think about it, where there are certain customizations that are kind of presumed
Yeah, they're baked
that
in.
it
Yeah.
supports. Yeah, they're baked in. So is there a path to that with something that you could do barring a sophisticated configurator website like a BMW would have?
Yes. Yeah, yeah, and yes, and that would be like kind of an ideal outcome. So, example, if you had just an arbitrary design,
Hmm.
and it would be even smoother if you had kind of thought through some of those items in advance. Like, what if we take away a bedroom or add a bedroom?
Hmm.
Uh, Maybe if you don't even market that, but it's available kind of in your back pocket. But within reason, some of those things you could do on the fly, you know, without without having done it before you interact with the client. Some items you could do that. Yeah.
Mm. Cool. And how would that be? How do you imagine presenting that to the market?
That so it'd definitely be, a website and social media, and I think it would have to be I'm just thinking of other industries that it would kind of mirror. Like, it definitely would mirror the architectural industry, because for the most part, an architect's website is, has the five sections at the top: about us, our projects,
Mm,
contact us, whatever. Like that's not going to do it. It has to be more of a higher end experience, to where when they go there, you can convert them and they kind of buy into that.
mhm.
Marketing is not my strong suit as far as like getting in front of those people. So that would,
Right.
yeah.
This is one of those things that potentially lends itself to physical magazine advertising, which I bet ya is, well, probably in the magazine that you'd need to be in. It'd probably be a little expensive, but we get a local to our neighborhood. There's like a local periodical. I think it's monthly, kind of a glossy, large magazine that's just specific to not even the city, but our neighborhood. And all the restaurants advertise in it, and all the realtors have full page ads. So it can't be like insanely expensive. And it's a relatively small market, and the housing here is brutally expensive. So I could imagine advertising, like just have a beautiful picture of, this house could be yours, or thinking about building, think it, I don't want to, can't find your dream home, build one, or whatever. And I could imagine seeing that, flipping through this magazine. I flipped through it last night. I could imagine seeing that and being like, huh, I would totally go to that website. And because it's such a, at least in our area, it's such an issue where it's insanely, you're buying $1 million home to tear down.
Yeah, yeah, very similar. Yeah, there was one idea I had. I didn't follow through with it, but it was to target sites. So there's a few neighborhoods that are really hot for redevelopment and tear downs and new
Hmm.
houses, and you
Yeah,
could almost even target the sites and just send them uh, your own published, magazine look.
that's a great idea. So
Yeah,
you could, if you kind of partnered or at least had relationships with realtors who are selling that stuff, it would be probably, I mean, because again, I was goofing around. I don't know if we said this before we started recording or not, but we were goofing around on Zillow last night, and like, what can you find for under 300,000 in the worst city in the state? And there's one house, but a whole bunch of land popped up, and $25,000 for a quarter acre or an acre, I don't know, like enough to build a house on. And if but it's just this ugly picture of woods, like ugly woods. So it's like, I could imagine the person who's selling that would love to be able to point to, here are some beautiful houses you could build on this lot, and you could get the plans for 35,000. You get the property for, I don't know, 100,000 or a million, whatever it is. And you buy these, look, here are 5 houses that would fit on this lot. Like, go fall in love with one and then buy the plans. I think that's really interesting.
Yeah, that actually could be an angle, like to, because I've had realtors ask me before, can you do an image for our marketing purposes?
Mhm.
And for the most part, what they want is probably $20,000 worth of work that they want to pay $500 for. But if you had already created the work
Right.
and we're pushing a few key relationships with those top, that could actually be an avenue.
That sounds I mean, I would explore it, as the consumer in this situation, I'd investigate that 100%. I would definitely investigate that. And whether it's an ad in like you target, let's say there's a place, like you said, a lot of redesign, what did you say? A lot of what's it called? With a lot of lots,
Oh,
redevelopment.
redevelopment or
Yeah.
infill. Yeah.
Okay. So there's a lot of redevelopment in the area, and you're like, okay, meet all the realtors that are associated with the plots or whatever, and maybe there's like a local mag that they all advertise in, that you put a thing, or maybe this is how you meet them, where they're all in there and they've got their glamour shots, they're all like dolled
Yeah.
up, and and then you've got a full page ad like selling a piece of property. Imagine how effective it would be to be able to present, new build plans with full renderings to sell the lot. I don't know how you'd word it exactly. They could tell you, the realtors could tell you, but that would be like, because they're all flipping through to see what everybody else's picture looks like, and it's like, whoa, what's this? And then if it was already easy for you, and they were like, we use this in the marketing materials, you could work out a deal in theory, and then they're selling, then they're paying you to sell your idea to the people that buy the land. It's pretty interesting.
Yeah, there probably is an angle. I had not recently even thought of anything like that. So that would be my fear would be that it might end up being a little too high touch. I'm kind of wanting to distance myself more from all of that. In a perfect world, you're kind of in isolation, making the magic happen, and it's that artist's
Hmm.
dream. Uh,
Hmm.
that's unfortunately that's not the reality at all. But I'd like to get more on that side of it.
It could be, yeah. I mean, it feels like the kind of thing where you'd create the relationship, and that would be the hard part, and it would just sort of be an ongoing referral thing, where where at a point, if it works, at a point relatively quickly, you'd have these relationships set up, and then you just be making new plans that would fit on these lots or the kinds of lots that are coming available. It's a little bit like doing spec work, but you're retaining the intellectual property. So it's not really spec work, because then the person isn't just buying it and that's that. Like, nobody else, you can't sell it again. It's not a one-time sale.
Right.
Okay, so
Yeah.
what's the high touch piece? That is, it the dealing with the realtors, or is it more like dealing
It
with the
would it would
magazine?
the realtors maybe not the individual clients definitely would. I've done spec houses. I don't know, 2 or 3 dozen spec houses over the years, and
Hmm.
those are actually great because the client is the developer. So if the developer is a good developer, they're great. A bad developer is horrible. Somebody that just retired with a little money and wants to play developer, those are
Hmm.
not good clients. But
Hmm.
a professional developer that hires you because they like your design, those are usually really good projects, and because you're kind of left to your own devices to solve the problem.
Hmm. And then what do they end up with at the end of one of those engagements?
The ones I've worked with before, they kind of want uh, those developers are more like general contractors in their
Yep.
mindset.
Hmm.
So a contractor just wants what they need to move to the next step. So they want the building permit, and then they don't ever want to call you again for the most part, unless there's a
Hmm.
problem.
Okay, and they understand the need for the plans in the whole drafting phase that most people don't.
Yeah. The rub is always that they're also kind of cheap. A
Hmm.
contractor, their whole business is comparing quotes and choosing the lowest bidder. So
Right.
that's why those
Right.
are not ideal clients.
In that way, but if you imagine, well, let's just explore this for 1 second because I like the sound. There are things about this that I really like. Um, if you were pulling stuff off the shelf, making minor modifications, could you not offer a price to them that would seem cheap to them, but was really profitable to you because you didn't start from scratch?
Yeah, yeah. I hadn't thought of that, but yes, if it's like the dinner. If they're in the kitchen while you're making the dinner,
Hmm.
people. I know people that don't like you to be in their kitchen while they're cooking. They want you to just go away.
Yeah.
So if the dinner if it came out of the room ready to go, that might actually not be a bad process.
Right. So there's sort of the idea of selling to a good developer feels closer to a good fit for you based on just this short conversation than even selling directly to a millionaire who has a empty lot and is going to be like, let me run this by my spouse, and like just like all of the hand holding. It feels like there'd be way less hand holding.
Yeah, it would
And
be more transactional and less emotional, I'm sure.
yeah, yeah. And the other thing about it is if they it's the gift that keeps on giving because these developers aren't going to stop developing. So if they've got a really attractive, they're really happy with the way that you work and the price that you offer and the speed that you can deliver it, then it's just like how many repeat homeowner clients do you get?
Uh, let's see. I think I'm probably pushing something like between 300 and 400 clients over the last 10 years. Most of those were
Mhm.
front loaded when I was doing tons of projects a year. And out of those, maybe a dozen have been multiple clients. I think one client hired me 3 or 4 times. That's as far as homeowners. When I look
Yeah.
at developers or contractors, I mean, there's one contractor that's hired me 60 times. You know, lots of
Dude,
small
this is
jobs,
like,
but
yeah, sure, sure. But like, that's exactly what I would have expected. Where once they have a trusted partner for a particular thing and you're pigeonholed in their mind as that thing, they just reach for that tool when they need it. So if you
yeah.
are,
If you make it easy for a contractor, uh,
Mhm.
they if you make it easy and they don't feel like they're constantly price focused, if they don't feel like they're paying double what everybody else is paying, they
Mhm.
probably will continue to call.
Yeah, so that could be a good runway thing, getting this off the ground. Maybe you also do to homeowners or maybe sell through realtors, not, just use realtors as a referral source.
Right, right.
And perhaps you can get less price sensitivity from the homeowners, although I don't know. Like who's cheaper, the developers or the homeowners?
Well, the problem is the a good developer is going to take all the margin. So and there's lots of people that are capable of quote unquote doing plans. You know,
Mhm.
like the cities for the most part don't even require you to have a license to do it. You could, if you were good at graph paper and pencil drawing, you could do your own plans. A homeowner could. So
Wouldn't that present a downstream problem for the developer though?
yes, yeah, and so but the problem is a lot of them they're really focused on the front end of the price and they're not thinking about that. So I had a perfect example a few months ago. A new to me developer called, and he wanted to do a house, and we got to the end of the conversation. I kind of talked to him too long before I threw out a price.
Uh-huh.
And when I threw out the price, I for what he was asking for, I think I said something like $20,000 to $30,000.
Mhm.
And he said, "Oh, well, I've got another architect that'll do it for a dollar." He had a really specific number, like $1.27 a square foot. And
Okay.
it was so specific. And immediately my first reaction was, well, why don't you call him? Like,
Yeah.
and he says, well, I have problems with him.
This is like one of my comics.
Yeah, no, it really was. It really was. The thing was, it was such a specific number that he threw out. I was like,
Right.
he can't be trying to lowball me. Like, he actually is used to paying that number. And
Yeah.
I could immediately, like, I'm not even going to convince him. I'm just not even going to get involved in that because I can already see the
Yeah.
problems he's going to present to me.
Yeah.
Like that's not a good client at all. But yeah, there's plenty of contractors that are and developers that are like that. If for a good example, there's architects that charge percentage fees. So
Charge what?
percentage fees, so the percentage of construction. So that say
Oh.
you have a $5 million house, there are
Hmm.
architects that'll charge 10%.
Right.
So there's not a large amount of them that'll get that money. They're very small, like, almost infinitesimal, but there are architects that'll charge 8, 10, 12%. And in different regions of the country, that's more accepted and less accepted. Here, not super common, but I know on the East Coast there's more of that. And then you're competing against people that might outsource to another country that are charging in round numbers like $5,000, $10,000. So the scale of a fee is exponential.
Yeah.
But for the most part, a developer is not going to pay anything on the upper 50% of the fee scale. They're going to be in the bottom 20%.
Right. I get that. And I don't know if this is possible, but the path here would be to collapse your costs so that they could still they could pay what they expect to pay, and you're like doing an hour and they give you $10,000.
Yeah, yeah, that would be. There's no reason why the designs that I have done for spec developers needed them to be involved in the design. For the
Hmm.
most part, I could have done that before I even met them and just had it on the shelf.
Right.
There's a few things that are really specific that they'll ask for, but for the most part, those are things you could modify.
What's an example just to kind of make it concrete?
So, thinking probably the one that you saw on my website that has the renderings.
Hmm.
That project had a few problems because it started like right as the COVID lockdown started, so it took a long time to get there. But
Hmm.
for the most part, they gave me a bedroom count, a rough square footage, how big they wanted the garage, and we had meetings throughout design. But I could have done that plan without them.
Hmm.
It's not like it's not like that client specifically directed this to go on the left and that to go on the right,
Yeah.
and for this move on the roof and for that move in the elevation.
Yeah, they let
Yeah,
you do your job. And yeah, it sounds really so not micromanagey. Like I imagine a homeowner is much more prone to being micromanagey. And the thing that I like about it for your demeanor is that it seems much more likely that you're going to get people who just let you do your job. If you go with developers, then they're experienced. They don't really care about most of the things the way you know, like I would
yeah. They
care.
have a few. They have a few hot buttons, which, if you've worked with any of them for more than two or three projects, it's going to be here locally. It's going to be wood frame construction. It's not going to be
Mhm.
steel and concrete. It's going to be mostly stucco because that's the cheapest thing they can put on a house, and that
Mhm.
differs. I know in other cities, stuccos actually cost more than brick.
Mhm.
And it's going to have the things that they know will sell, which is the kitchens and the bathrooms.
Mhm.
So there's a few things that you could key in that every developer is going to want once they
Right.
reach a certain level.
And now, what? Speaking of level, are there? There's got to be, if it's anything like here, certain developers that specifically do high end stuff.
Yeah, 100%. So the range of developers is going to be everybody from, because I've worked with a few different types. Some are people that are, say, 40s, 50s, that have retired from their career that always wanted to do this, or they got into
Mhm.
house flipping during the recession.
Yep.
One was an airline pilot who got furloughed and he wanted to get into it. Those
Mhm.
are those are awful clients,
Yeah.
just awful. But on the high end, you will have more vertically integrated developers that are also the general contractor. Uh, One of my clients, like his wife is the realtor, so that his wife will list the home, he'll sell the home.
Mhm.
Another one of my developers, the wife is the interior designer, so the
Mm.
husband will build the home, the wife will do the interior
Oh, I
design.
love that. That's a cool little niche.
Yeah, so I would never be a developer because most of being on when I say residential developer, they're really a contractor
Mhm.
for the most part. There are some that just hire everything, but for the most part, they kind of self perform.
Mhm.
But they have to deal with 300 or 400 different people over 2 or 3 years to get the thing done.
Oh,
You know,
I know it's not. I could
yeah, it's
never.
it's a nightmare.
It's like making a
So
movie.
yeah. I asked one of the guys, how many people, how many, it's mostly men. How many
Mm.
men showed up to this house to build it over the course of the 2 years? And he came up with a number of approaching 500.
I could not. I can't. I do not have the constitution to do something like that.
Yeah, yeah.
That's funny. All right, so for me, the I love the idea of having a sort of a, what would you call it? Just like a bookshelf. It's like a shelf
Catalog.
of plans, catalog. Yes, thank you.
Yeah.
Like a catalog of plans for the kinds of things that are going to be attractive to the high end of the market, and and just completely collapsing your costs so that you can offer competitive pricing that meets the call it requirements of the kinds of buyers that you'd be dealing with.
The
And
expectations. Yeah.
yeah, so with the homeowner, maybe the expectation is some higher level of customization. I don't know if it's finishes or number of bedrooms or size of garage or whatever, and then it's going to be similar with the developers or the contractors, but they're gonna want, like you said, it's gonna be stucco. It's gonna be. Did you mean that they want wood construction? They must, right?
Oh yeah, like wood studs.
Yep.
So
Yeah.
like if you're going to build a house out of wood studs in my market, and then you compare that to a house built out of concrete block, the block might be double or triple the price.
Right. They don't want that. Okay. So yeah. So boy, it sure seems like if you're trying to optimize, systematize, productize, it sure seems like the developers are a better fit. They might be tougher. I can't even imagine they're tougher to get to. I would imagine. How many, like, do you have relationships with these sorts of people?
Yeah, yeah. Somewhere between a half dozen and a dozen, probably.
And what does your lead flow look like in terms of the homeowner type of buyer?
This is one thing that I've learned, and Blair Enns mentioned this during Win Without Pitching, but I kind of feel it. You can't take a customer that's used to paying you $500 and charge them $50,000.
Correct.
So the problem with a lot of those developer relationships that I have is that some of those I might have priced 5 or 6 years ago,
Hmm.
you know, a fraction of what I want to charge today. So I don't
Hmm.
work with them anymore because of that. Like every time I've made a big leap in income, I've had to
Yep.
cycle through a new group of developers.
Right. That makes sense. But you know where they are. You understand
Yeah,
what they
no, I do.
think.
Yeah.
Yeah. Right. So it's not necessarily that you'd use the network that you already have, but you're an insider.
Yeah, and even if I didn't, if I identified a different city in the same region, it wouldn't take long.
Right. Yeah. You know how to do it. You know how to speak their language. You know what they want. You can read their minds. So that is, to me, that's like a easier puzzle to solve than, like, how do I attract millionaires who are looking to build a new house from scratch. The things that pop to my mind there are magazine advertising, inflate magazines. I don't feel like it. Maybe it's probably Instagram. Um, Instagram. I don't even think it's Instagram ads. I think it's like Instagram, and I don't think it's things like Architectural Digest, because
Oh
I
no, yeah,
no, because I think you need to be, or I don't mean that specifically. I mean national magazines. I don't think it's national magazines because well, maybe it would be if this was totally hands off and they were just downloading PDFs from your website. It could be national magazines, but if you're going to focus on a particular style that only makes sense in certain regions, then it would be a waste of money to advertise in like a national magazine. So
yeah, yeah. I have interior designer friends that are really good at Instagram, and their entire lead flow comes through Instagram. Just
yeah. Yeah, I know people who are in very visual fields like 3D modeling, for example, where all the leads come from Instagram. Combination of YouTube and Instagram. Yeah.
yeah.
What's your reaction to the idea of networking your way into introductions with higher end or high end developers, people who are are probably willing to spend the kind of money that you would need to receive, and then what would you need to do to collapse the costs so that the prices they're expecting to pay are really profitable to you?
So my first reaction, honestly, would be a little bit of fear with the people that I've worked with before. So like it
Yeah.
almost seems easier just like if it was a fresh start in a different city and just
Hmm.
identify developers and contractors in that area and then just have a
Yep.
clean slate.
Yep.
That's not scary at all. Uh, as
What would
far
the
as what
offer be? So, like, what would you say to
the
them?
offer,
So,
I really like the idea of a catalog.
Mm-hmm.
And even if it is a physical catalog that was printed like a magazine
Mm-hmm.
that had some heft to it, it's not 30 pages, maybe it's got more heft than that. And it's almost like it's a thing that you could leave with them.
Yep.
That could be realtors or contractors.
Mm-hmm.
And hey, if this is what your client likes, I'm your guy. You know,
Yep.
so as far as like what it would take to get there, it would take some runway for sure. Maybe 6 or 8 months to work through creating that, which I could do right now.
Mm-hmm. What would be a test that you could do before going to all of that effort? Like some digital version or something on an iPad. There's something that wouldn't require all of the printing and editing and all of that, that just to
Yeah,
test.
probably something that was a link that didn't have very many designs, that maybe I recycled some things that I had done before
Hmm.
that I liked, maybe.
Okay. So it's sort of like a portfolio kind of presentation. I like the idea of doing it. I mean, if you're going to do it in person with a magazine or a coffee table book kind of portfolio, why not go with an iPad and have it be, you're not going to leave it behind, presumably, but
Yeah, well, I mean, also I could just do it kind of the low rent bootstrap way, which is I have a binder, a binding machine. I could actually print some stuff at Staples on nice paper and bind it myself. That wouldn't be a huge cost or time.
yeah, for me, I wouldn't want to go 6 or 8 months and be like, okay, now let's test it.
Yeah,
So I would, you probably get there, but I like to prove to myself that I'm onto something before I go all in on this thing that's going to feel like a sunk cost later if it doesn't work.
yeah, that's a
So,
good point because a buddy of mine, we actually tried to hyper specialize in something. It was automobile related and kind of high end garages. Because
mhm.
there's a lot of guys around here that'll buy a garage condo. I don't know if you've ever heard of this.
No.
Okay, so say you've sold your software company or your healthcare company, and you have a pile of 15 or $18 million, and all of a sudden you've got McLarens and Porsches coming out the
Yeah.
wazoo that you can't keep at home. This is a real problem for some people. They'll
Hmm.
go to a development that's almost like a strip warehouse, but it's been condominiumized so that you get your own little 2,000 square foot bay with the giant roll up doors and the 20-foot ceilings, and you can
Okay.
park your Porsches in there. So anyway, so we tried to focus on that. That was more of a one-off where you would build that kind of high-end garage on your own property.
Hmm.
And we actually went to the Barrett Jackson and had a booth and did some internet marketing and we pursued it, and we put about 2 months into it, and it didn't really pan out. And I'm not sure whether that was just because of the way we marketed or we didn't stick with it long enough. But
Hmm.
it led to some clients that really we didn't recover our costs with the clients we got out of it.
Hmm.
But yeah, we went all in right away, and we really
Yeah.
never proved the concept.
Yeah, I think certain concepts need that kind of all in, like they can't picture it unless it's done kind of thing. But this doesn't feel, the idea of making yourself available at an extremely profitable but also affordable price to high end developers. I don't think I don't think you need much more than what you probably already have. So then it becomes a like, all right, like how do I get in touch with these people? What do I say so that they understand what I'm offering here? And how can I deliver it in a way that makes it crystal clear to them what it would be like to work with me and what's in it for them? And and then have some kind of like next step, like next call to action is, whatever, add their email address to your mailing list or something, keep in touch, maybe it's manual, and just see if they're like, if they respond, if somebody responds to the offer and is like, I've got a, if you meet some new person, you get your foot in the door, you show them the binder, and you get somebody or multiple people that are like, I could hire, how much is this? I could hire you right now for this. I've got a project right now I could use this for. Then
Yeah, it might
okay.
be a little. It might be a little slower than that. Like one good developer I know, like he might do 2 projects a year.
Hmm.
So there might be a little bit of a time before you're able to prove that.
Okay.
They all seem to have projects that are kind of small. I mean, relative to a new house, or major renovations and additions and stuff. But those are things that
Hmm.
are very hard to systematize. Like a
Yeah.
brand new, from scratch, brand new home. That might not be one that they have 10 times a year.
Okay, that's fair. So, what if you did target an area that was about to go through or is going through a big sort of phase, like a lot of developments or something? I mean, is that
Yeah, yeah,
possible?
yeah. And I think if what I could see working is if you targeted, say, a dozen of those people. I don't know if a dozen, that might be too many, maybe 6 or 8, and just try out different approaches and kind of see what seems to stick.
Hmm.
It might be 3 or 4 months before they actually have something realistically that they could bring you in on. So
Right.
there'd be a little
Okay.
bit of runway there.
That makes sense. Okay. I mean, I do like the idea though of bootstrapping it or MVP from the software world, MVPing a
Yeah.
test. And I don't know, you don't really need to, I don't know if you're planning on doing this or you would be planning on doing it or not, but you don't need to get into I don't know if you need to get into the cost cutting measures that you would be implementing on your end. In other words, maybe you would. I mean, maybe it would make it more attractive to them if you came in and said, "Hey, I've got a catalog of really high-end designs that are perfect for, new developments, like you're building a house from scratch." And, I wanted to talk to you about the pricing and that sort of thing. Not only is it fixed price like that, but I don't know, maybe you say it's very quick. It's like less work for them, fewer meetings for them.
Yeah, I could see on their end that an advantage would be some of these developers and contractors. They have the same problem, just on a different side of the table, where they have an uncontrollable client that's constantly changing their mind, that constantly changes scope, and that's how developers lose money, is not managing scope creep. So there could be a way that you could appeal to that this is going to keep them, you know, on the rails, so to speak.
Mm. So when you said, no, when the developer comes along and they've got like a brand new project, brand new build, are they developing with a homeowner or are they just building a house here that they're going to sell to somebody?
It depends on the time of the market. So
Mhm.
if the market's really hot, they'll go full spec. They'll do everything at risk. When
Mhm.
times are leaner, they kind of go the other way. I've heard many contractors say, depending on the economy, they're either a spec builder or they focus on clients. So
Got
they
it.
kind of play both sides.
Okay, that makes sense. All right. Well, the spec ones to me sound like the easier ones, but that's so cyclical. So,
Yeah, totally. Yeah, like a couple of my houses have been complete specs through the point where drywall started to show up on site, and then they sold it.
yeah, that's the way the market is around where I am. It's ridiculous. Like thing goes on the market on a Friday and it's gone on Monday.
Yeah, and I mean they're at a lot of risk for that. They're at a lot of risk. Some of these guys, when they're first starting out, they're mortgage their house and everything just to make that happen.
Oof.
So
Yeah, gamblers. Okay, cool. Well, is this helpful? Does this feel like
yeah, I think that's at least two paths that I didn't even see, which is more one on one than I would like in an ideal world, but it's, I think, more achievable to get to someplace faster.
right? And perhaps it's a phase thing where you get paid more than you might for just a plain old plan, uh, like a self service kind of thing. But you build up your binder, you build up your catalog, you get paid to build up your catalog. It could be a phase that you go full product at the end where you're selling the high end. You're the one putting the magazines in the supermarket or wherever, the
Right.
ads in the high end neighborhood magazines. Hmm. Cool. Well,
Yeah.
this has been a fun conversation. I hope it was a little bit helpful, and perhaps you could keep in touch and let me know and let people
Yeah,
know how it
absolutely.
goes.
Yeah, like I said, just a couple of ideas I didn't even anticipate. So I'm definitely going to think about that and how I could do that, because I could see some of that working.
Cool. Where can people go to find out more about what you're doing and maybe look at those amazing pictures on your homepage?
Oh, I guess my website, Jason Comer Architect, last updated in 2019. So
Still looks good. All right, folks, that's it for this week. I'm Jonathan Stark, and I hope you join me again next time on Ditching Hourly. Bye.